This is For the Creators.
Hey guys, welcome back to For the Creators. I hope you are well. Today we're sitting down with Kristen Saberre. Kristen is a screenwriter and author living in Los Angeles. Kristen comes from a family of athletes, avid readers and musicians, and she really honed in on her writing when she went to Brown University. Kristen has been credited as a story editor, a staff writer and a writer, and currently writes for Nightfall, which is on Amazon Prime. We cover everything we could about how to take a script from the paper onto the screen, what it's like writing for a blockbuster TV show, the differences between writing for a book and for TV and for a movie. All in all, we cover what it's like to be a screenwriter, working in the center of it all, Hollywood. Really hope you like this episode. I'm sure you will. As always, take notes and share with a friend. Without further ado, please enjoy this episode with Kristen Saberre.
Okay, well, welcome to the show, Kristen.
Hello.
How are you?
Very good.
Good. So, we had a chance meeting in LA at a breakfast spot where I kind of overheard you speaking about scripts and basically interrupted you just as you was leaving. So I just wanted to say thanks for not thinking I'm crazy.
No, for sure. It's very LA. You gotta take those chances, like why not?
For sure, man. Exactly, right? That's why we're on the show right now, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So can you paint us a picture of the early life of Kristen Saberre?
Sure. Well, the early life. Let's see. I was born in New Orleans. My family is been there for a few generations, but my dad moved us to Alabama, to Birmingham, Alabama, when I was 3. And so I grew up there until I went away to college. But yeah, Birmingham is very, very Southern. It's very, it's fine. It's also very suburban. So it felt like anywhere USA. And I did a lot of kind of stuff that everyone does. I played sports, and my mom tried to get me to take dance. I did dance for 1 year and was like, I'm done. Because I have 2 brothers and I'm in the middle of 2 brothers. So I was really rejecting anything that made me not like my brothers. So I was definitely a tomboy.
Right.
Yeah, but we watched a lot of movies and read a lot of books, and that I kind of started writing pretty early, just for myself.
Oh, right.
I own notebooks and just making up stories because I don't know,
why not?
Why not? And I read a lot of, I'm definitely an Anglophile. I read a lot of British stuff. I was really into Roald Dahl.
He's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Which is your favorite one?
I remember being very, very into the BFG. I feel like that was my first favorite book.
Awesome.
And then as I got older, I think that changed. But I just remember being in 2nd grade and be like, this is my favorite book ever. And yeah. So, but yeah, I love a lot of them, and I love the Willy Wonka movie from the 70s is just classic.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, so I don't know. I just kind of ran around doing sports, and I was also a nerd because I read a lot and good at school. And so then after kind of the youth years, I went away to the East Coast because I wanted to get out of my Southern cocoon and go to the liberal East Coast. And I went to Brown. So I went to a fancy nerd school.
Oh, yeah.
And it was awesome because it just kind of opened up my little Southern cocoon world to the rest of the world.
What was you studying?
I studied English literature.
Right.
And I think Brown now has a creative writing major or concentration. But at the time they didn't. But Brown, you can just kind of study whatever you want. Like they're just like, just do something. But I pretty much was like, I'm going to just read books and use my free time to like explore other things like theater and some early kind of film and video, you know, messing around with that stuff. And I thought I was going to be a doctor, so I did a lot of pre-med classes. And that vanished pretty quickly. I was like, I don't really want to do this. And yeah, so should I just keep going?
Yeah, I was just thinking, what made you pivot from doing sports to writing?
Yeah, so I remember like in school doing sports, but I was always like the like nerdy, well, not even nerdy, but just like the person who played sports but also was really good at school.
Right.
And so I think there came a time where I realized like I didn't have to choose, but like especially, so I played soccer or football, I guess, all through, all through high school. But basketball, I quit like halfway through because it was so competitive, and I realized that they kind of wanted you to just be all basketball or nothing. Right. And I was like, yeah, but like I have to think about my future. I don't want basketball to be my future. And like it would get to the point where they would be really upset if I needed to focus on academics, and that just felt really wrong. So I kind of quit basketball and was like, I'm going to throw myself into like the best, you know, I can do at school and to sort of get out of here. And yeah, so I think that kind of shift to like focus on my academics and then really getting into Brown was kind of like, just, I felt really like, oh, I could maybe do anything I wanted. Right. Maybe.
Yeah.
In a way that it's not like I hadn't felt like that before, but it didn't really occur to me. I was just like kind of, you know, going about life, but something about going away and going somewhere that sounds fancy just really made me think about my future in a way that I hadn't before.
That makes a lot of sense, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That really makes a lot of sense, especially with the point about going away and being somewhere that's renowned. It kind of cements thoughts in your mind, like, oh, because you also see other people that have done the same thing. They're coming from all different walks of life and pursuing whatever their vision is. So exactly. I suppose that's a bit similar to moving to LA.
Yeah, so after like when I was finishing up Brown, I was kind of like, what am I doing? I don't know. And a lot of friends from school were kind of headed to New York, like whether they knew what they were doing or not. And something about that felt too comfortable. Mm. And I don't really know why. I feel like I'm really proud of like my 21-year-old self because I just had this instinct that like if I went somewhere comfortable, I would never figure out what I was like, what I wanted to do or what I was supposed to be doing, because I would just be too busy being comfortable. Right. And I knew that LA was like terrifying. And even though I didn't know what I was going to do there, it just felt like I would have to figure it out. Like there would be more urgency and it would like something would come from being in that sort of urgent state. Absolutely. More than just being comfortable. Yeah. And so
what preconceptions did you have of LA before you moved there?
I definitely, I knew that like Hollywood was there and like all my favorite movies from growing up. It just, you know, like even just like USC and Spielberg and all of that kind of Hollywood, like the version that just made my childhood, like Indiana Jones movies. Like I knew that was kind of like in LA. And then I also just knew that it felt very like there's also this superficial element versus like coming from like this kind of academia, New York seemed like that's where intellectuals go and culture. And, so I was kind of like, oh, there might not be culture in LA, but there's Spielberg. and I knew I wanted to, like, I didn't know what part of the process I wanted to do. Like I'd always wanted to write, but I didn't really feel like that was real because I didn't know how to pursue that. So it just felt like not a real thing. So I didn't, it wasn't even an option. I was just like, I know I want to do something in film and television. I don't know what, but I think I should just move to LA. And I gave myself 2 years because I was like, look, just give yourself 2 years. And then if it's still awful, leave.
Yeah.
But it wasn't awful. It was great.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah, I love LA. I mean, I've been here for about 12 years.
Wow.
And it was definitely lonely at first because I was 21 or 22. A lot of people my age had friends already. Like everyone either came out with a big group of people from college or they went to college here. So nobody was really trying to make friends.
Yeah.
So that was hard. And then the first like few jobs that I got were in post-production. And I basically started as an assistant editor because I really loved the video editing process. And it was very like problem solving oriented and cerebral and appealed to that side of me. But so I kind of started there and everyone I worked with was like 10 years older than me. So I felt like I had no friends.
Right.
But that didn't last forever. This was like 07, 08 and like dating apps are like really becoming a thing sort of, well, not even apps, like just like dating
services,
online, like everything was online. So that helped make dating possible because dating is really impossible in LA in real life. I'm married now, but like every boyfriend, thank you. Every boyfriend that I had in LA, I met online, and every time I tried to be like, I'm going to meet someone in real life, nothing happened. Like it was just, yeah. So it was kind of a cool thing because it felt like, oh, I can have some control in the situation.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. LA became easier over time.
So
it was definitely,
was it more of the meeting people is just harder there? Was it superficial like you thought it was?
So yes and no. I think that the kind of superficial club going, drug doing, staying out late party people definitely are here, and that's awesome. Not my thing. I'm such a stay-at-home girl. So I think it was more just about finding my people and finding people who had like similar interests. Right, and so it can be, but LA is just so big. Like the thing is that everything is here. It's just spread out. And so you have to like look for things and find and just kind of be lucky to kind of stumble upon either the like neighborhoods that appeal to you or like the people. So
yeah, for sure.
It really is like it's like a scavenger hunt.
Yeah. I suppose it is a bit like that. You do have to be quite intentional when you're there, just in terms of travel and getting around.
Yeah.
But like you said, when you do find your people in your neighborhoods and stuff, it's
for
really,
sure.
really nice.
Yeah, for me, so I eventually started realizing I really wanted to write and I should probably figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
Like after 2 years of being an assistant editor, I was like, I really want to write, and I think I could start. Like I basically did the assistant thing, which is when you try to get an assistant job and then try to keep an assistant job basically until you get promoted. And so I basically, and they're very competitive. So I was like, I knew I wanted to write television, at least start there. Television was like really booming, and I had heard how collaborative it was and how empowering it was for the writer. Because in television, the head writer is the head producer. So they're kind of like in that, it's like really a writer's medium because they have a lot of executive decision.
Right.
And,
yes. Yeah.
And everything is kind of in theory, like the writer's vision, the head writer's vision. And so is
that what show running is?
Yeah, exactly. So usually if you are the person who created a show, but sometimes maybe you aren't the creator, you just get hired to be the showrunner of like someone else's show. If maybe someone's like never worked in television before, or they're relatively young or new to the role. Because being a showrunner is kind of like being a CEO of like a company that's worth several $1 million. And you kind of like, you can imagine like if you never had that job before, like it could go bad.
It's likely to go bad.
Yeah. And so showrunning, I mean, it's a hard job. I've never been a showrunner, not yet. And I'm not super anxious to like get there too quickly because it's very, I think, fulfilling, but it's such hard work. Like, I don't know a single showrunner who's not like sleep deprived and stressed out and feeling like they are not, they're like kind of failing at home because people never see them. And then they're also failing because they can't get it all done. Like it's hard. Yeah. But it's also cool because you get to like run your own show.
Yeah. It's got a trade-off.
Yeah. So
I had a question on that actually. So because you've been credited as a story editor, staff writer, and a writer. How do those roles vary in writing? Do you find it easier to collaborate, or do you prefer writing everything yourself?
So wait, what was the second part of the question?
Whether you prefer to collaborate, or do you prefer writing episodes on your own? Yeah,
so the cool thing about television is that you get to kind of do both. We typically, and I should probably clarify like American television, because I really don't know how I know a little bit of how like British television works. Like I feel like sometimes it's the same and sometimes it might be different, just like traditionally. But this is just how, like most of the things that I worked on, usually you have like a writer's room. And also this is dramas because like comedies, sometimes their rooms work completely different. But in like a typical drama room, it's like all the writers like will gather in a conference room, and you'll kind of, if it's like the first day of work, then you're talking a lot about like what is the season going to be, and you're kind of, and it's usually led by the showrunner saying, this is what I envision and these are what I'd like to see happen. Like they usually give you like some starting areas and goals, and then everybody else starts spitting out ideas that support that might fit in the same realm. So it's very fun and collaborative in that way. And then so you kind of usually you arc out the season, and then after a week or so you start getting into episode by episode. And then, but everybody's usually still kind of working together, and you'll break the episode together. And then once you kind of know what the beats of the episode are, then typically whoever's writing that episode will go and get to disappear for a week or so to write an out.
Okay.
And that's when you get to be like, okay, now I have my marching orders. Everybody is all on the same page. And now I get to actually like sit down and write. And so that's the kind of part where it's like, if you like solitude, then you get to kind of be away from everyone for a little bit. And then once the outline is written and approved, then you go to script.
Okay. So when you say outline, so when you're in solitude and you've written an episode, are you writing it as a screenplay or?
So yeah, so the outline is kind of like it's more like, it's kind of, the idea is to sort of summarize. You'll go scene by scene and you'll summarize what happens in the scene and like what the characters are feeling, and you write it out in prose.
Right.
So so it'll be more like a book, but you're kind of you don't have to get into too much detail, because the idea is it's just kind of a shorter version to send. One, it helps the writers sort of solidify the flow of a scene. Like if you can write it in a paragraph, like this happens and then this happens and then this happens, like then you know that you get a sense that like the scene will work. And then it also is like, we'll send the outline to the studio, the network, all the people that give us notes and like have to approve everything before we go to production.
Right.
So the first step is for the studio or network or whoever else you have to kind of get approval from to read the outline, because it's shorter and they can kind of at a glance be like, oh, I like this idea. And it's better for them to say no to something that's shorter than for you to like pour your heart and soul into a script.
Yes.
And then for them to be like, oh, I don't like this at all. So you get to write the brief version, and then they weigh in and they tell you what they love. They tell you what to like change and kind of give their opinions, and then you kind of regroup and say, okay, well, that note's very good and that note didn't make sense, but like we should do it anyway because it'll make them happy. And then sometimes you're like,
picking your battles.
Exactly. Yeah. And so then you can go to script and really just write. Yeah, it's like a screenplay. It's just, that's where, you can really pour your heart and soul in and make magic happen. And then, of course, that also goes through the approval process like several times. And then once it's all signed off, then you can send it to like production and, the actors and your line producer and everybody who's gonna like, get it ready to shoot.
Wow.
But you kind of want everything to be, in theory, have been vetted. You don't want to be shooting and then the network is like, don't do that. And it's like, but we just spent millions of dollars shooting it.
Yeah,
so you try to get all the kinks out long before.
How long does that process usually take before it gets to production? And obviously it depends on the show and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. So I think so. I'm going to guess an average of 6 weeks. Just a very offhand average.
Yeah.
Because some shows, like a lot of our broadcast shows, will the writers will start, and then 6 weeks later production starts. And so what that means is the writers will start and they basically have 6 weeks to get the first episode ready for production. And then it's kind of like a train, and then, maybe it's staggered by like a week. Then you kind of have this 6 week lead to kind of get things in a pipeline. But the shows I tend to work on are more like cable or streaming. And a lot of those shows, instead of just having that 6 week lead before things start filming, usually you have several months, and if you're lucky, you've written all the scripts. Like, you're done before anything starts shooting, or you're very close to done. And there's definitely pros and cons to both. I think things are leaning towards the latter these days, just because there's a lot more television and a lot shorter orders. Like, things, we used to have shows that were like, 30 episodes a season. It would just run all year long.
Yeah.
With like a couple months off. But now everything's kind of like 13, 10, and just,
a lot more
shorter
story to pack in.
Exactly. So that's kind of changed the production schedule, and on one hand it's cool because you can write everything and kind of know where you're headed. It's great for production because they know what to expect and they can plan in like a longer sense. But and then because in the broadcast version where you only have 6 weeks before you start shooting an episode, it's so fast, and a decision you make might bind you from doing something later on because it's like, well, we filmed it, and so it is. But there's also the upside to that is it's a little more fluid. Like, I think sometimes it's like if an actor is like not working out, you can just write them off and then go another direction.
Right.
But like if it's cable, it's kind of like, well, you made all those deals and everything way in advance, and you can't like you can't change things as quickly, but hopefully you don't have to. But
I suppose that's similar to like if you were writing for Netflix or Amazon Prime, where they drop all the episodes at once.
Yeah, so that's kind of like the cable streaming model where you've done everything, and then it's just all there at once, and it's nice. Like it's comfortable. The downside is that because you have to wait for everything to be finished. Like if we're writing and then we're done before production starts, and then there's probably like 6 months of production, and then after that there's however many months of post, and then who knows when Netflix is going to air it, and then once they air it, then maybe they'll tell you if you have a second season. Meanwhile, it's been like a year, and you're just like, am I going back to that job or no? Like,
oh, yes.
That's the downside, is that you have to kind of wait or, leave because you're like, I need a job and I finished 6 months ago.
So from the audience's perspective, where we're watching shows and we're binging shows, and then 1 year you've just one season's dropped, you've watched it all in one day, and then you wait a year and it comes back, and from an audience perspective you're expecting it to be consistent to the first season, but from what you're saying, in that year so many things can change. The writers,
so many things could change. Yeah, people could leave. I mean, usually there's contracts to make sure that nothing, there's people are usually kind of locked in, in theory to like a reasonable extent, like, so that like we don't lose actors and we don't lose writers, but it's a balance, because sometimes it's like, well, if you are kind of under contract to something, but it's going to be a really long time, like you can make an argument for like, okay, well, I have to go do something else. Or sometimes you might ask for to be in second position, like, okay, or first position. So if you have a job, but you have no information on when it's coming back, you might go and work on something else, knowing that you'll come back, like if you hear. So different things can change, but I think kind of if the showrunner is the same and if the vision is clear, then it's pretty it's possible to keep things consistent, even if people are kind of changing.
Yeah, well, like you said, it's like running a multi-million-dollar company, right?
Yeah.
The employees
Yeah,
change, but the product has to stay consistent.
exactly.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I forgot to ask how you transitioned from being an editor to being
Yeah.
a writer. Well,
Yeah,
in the
so
writer's room.
I basically, yeah, I basically realized that when I was like an assistant editor, it's like your job is to kind of make connections and to like work on your own projects. And I just never did that. I was like, I don't feel like doing that, because I realized that what I wanted to do was write, and like I would go home and like write something. So that's why I kind of like tell people, like when they're trying to figure out what they want to do, that for me, I was just like, well, what's the thing I did when I like went home or like didn't have to do anything?
That's very good advice.
Yeah, like that's probably what one should do. And so I was like,
kind of like do what you do when you don't need to do it. Do the thing
exactly.
you do when you don't need to do it.
Right. Yeah, because that's like the thing you like. So I basically, by then I'd been in LA for a couple years and knew that I could do the assistant thing. So I kind of networked my butt off to find an assistant job. And I was basically like a PA to writers. And then that was really cool because it was the first time I had a job with a bunch of other writers and people who'd been in the business for a long time. And I really learned a lot. And I started making friends that were my age, friends that like to do what I like to do.
There you go.
And just common interests. And though that was like 2010, and those people are still like my very best friends. Nice. And I just, honestly, that's when I really started writing for the screen, because I'd written like some stuff for screen, but not really anything that followed a particular format. And I'd written just other stuff, but this was like, okay, I want to write for television, so I should learn how to do that. And and it was all just like writing my own stuff, and all of a sudden I had a bunch of writer friends that could like give me notes and give me advice. And so I did that.
Learned by doing.
Yeah, for sure. And just like, cause there were other writers that had been assistants for longer, and they were kind of a little closer to making that leap. And they gave me a lot of advice, like you should write a pilot or write a spec. So like, two like good samples, if you're like kind of getting into writing over here, are like you could write like a pilot, like you could write, come up with the idea for your own show and write the first episode. And then also like specs are kind of not as used as they were, but if you write a spec of a show that's already on television, people don't really use those as samples anymore, but I think it's actually a really excellent practice, because it teaches you how to write television, because, you get to basically do your own version of something that you're very familiar with. And
I'm sure
a lot
of Game of Thrones fans that would take that that option.
Yeah, I know. Gosh, right now, yeah.
Rewrite the whole of season 8.
Oh my gosh. But yeah, it's like a good, like the first TV sample I ever wrote was like a Mad Men spec, and it was just like an episode of Mad Men. And I was watching a lot of Mad Men at the time, and it was really helpful because I knew those characters' voices. I knew kind of thing that they would do. And so it was a really great exercise to like practice writing characters that somebody else made up. And a lot of television writing, unless you're the showrunner or creator, is writing characters that somebody else made up. So, which is really, I think it's really fun, and it can be very satisfying to like do all the creating yourself. But I think that it's really fun to play with characters that, like, if they're good characters, it's fun to play with them regardless of who made them. And so much of TV writing is like, yeah, like somebody made a world and made these characters, and you get to like tell stories with them. But your job is not to like make up what these characters sound like. Like, you have to be true to the template that's already been made.
Right.
You know, so that's like its own specific skill. So I think even though people don't really read, like if you go on for a job interview, nobody's going to read your like sample episode of Mad Men.
Yeah.
But I think it's a really great exercise for becoming a TV writer.
Yeah, it gets you used to the whole process.
Exactly.
And really, the whole process of writing for other people's characters, but also the actual creative side of it, of diving into those characters and into their voices and into their experiences. That's really good.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, but the main sample, like most TV writers, just write pilots. So, you know, that's kind of what your portfolio is full of, is like the pilot episode of a bunch of series that may or may not ever get made, but it's kind of, that's the thing that you use to like represent you, and that other people read to decide if they want to meet you or, you know, hire you.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So
let's say you have you have a draft script. So like you're saying, a pilot episode, and you're excited about the vision of the show. What are your recommended steps from there?
Yeah. So most of television is like, it's like part of it is writing. You have to like practice and have a great sample. But then the other half of the game is networking. And because when you have that script, it's like, well, where are you going to, who do you give it to? And so I think that for me, I'd been working as an assistant on a lot of shows, meeting a lot of writers and showrunners. And for me, it always made sense that once I had like a new pilot, to like send it to someone, either a friend who is a showrunner who might have a job opening, or just a friend who I wanted to know that I was a good writer, so that if they heard of something, they think of me. But ultimately, the goal is kind of to get representation, like agents or managers, or both. I have both. And that was something that, like, some people know a lot of agents and managers just through the business, and I didn't know any. So it took me a while to like kind of get in that orbit, and also it's all, you know, even if you have a amazing script, you have to find the person who thinks it's amazing and knows how to do anything with it, which is a whole battle, because, you know, nothing is objective, and the person who represents you has to, they might even recognize like, wow, you're a great writer and this is very good, but if they don't like understand, if they don't know like the people who would like it or quite what to do with it, if they don't kind of see the vision of you, like they can't do anything. So you have to find the people who are excited about your writing and you, and know like what to do with you. I think that's what makes like finding a good rep really hard, is not just getting your great script out there. It's like finding someone who responds to it.
Definitely. It kind of sounds similar to what you was talking about with dating in LA. And finding people to be friends with.
Yeah, because it's, you know, not everyone is perfect for everyone. You really have to find your match. And it's frustrating because you can't control when that happens. And you have to be patient. And there's also, like, you could be in a bad relationship with a rep. Like, you could be, somebody might be your agent, and that might make you feel good. Like, ooh, I have an agent. But if they don't really think your work, if they don't know what to do with your work, or if they're not excited about it, it's just like, why are we doing this? And
So how did you find your people, your team? How did it break through for you?
Yeah, so my very first staff writing job was on Hit the Floor, which is it was a VH1 series, and then the fourth season was on BET, and that was a show that I had been an assistant on for all the seasons before, and I just got lucky, and when the fourth season came around, I got promoted to staff writer.
Brilliant.
And staff writer is like the baby writer position, so it's like the first rung on the ladder. But it's amazing. Like I was like the luckiest person in the world to finally, after like years of being an assistant, like finally just, I was like,
how many years was it from when you moved to LA to that moment?
Let's see, I moved to LA in 2007. I started working as a assistant in 2010, and then it was 2017 when I was a staff writer. Wow. So that was 7 years of hustling, and some people do it right away. Yeah. Some people never are assistants, and some people it takes longer. Like it really is just, and the other thing is that like being an assistant is really like your day job. It's like, that's what you do to pay the rent, but your real job is like you're writing and you're meeting people. So it's not like, so you're always writing, you're always hustling. And then eventually when forces you cannot control conspire, you get promoted. So I was a staff writer in 2017, and then I had a lawyer. Like my friends were like, we're going to connect you with this lawyer because, he can help you with like the contract of your deal and like, making sure that you get a good deal and you're protected. I was like, great. And that was very straightforward because they're long friends of mine that I trust, and they trusted this guy, and it was all very objective. There's nothing creative about it. It was just kind of like, great, we'll be a good match. Let's do it. And so he did that deal for Hit the Floor, and then I told him I needed an agent, and he, being a lawyer, interacts with agents and managers a lot, and he was like, I'll definitely let you know if I hear of anybody who's also looking for clients. And so he reached out and was like, hey, these two friends of mine, they're managers, they loved your script, and they'd love to meet you. And I was like, okay. So, they were managers and not agents, and they do kind of the same thing, but kind of different things, and it's all very vague and confusing. But I really wanted an agent because I felt like agents sometimes can help me get my next job. Like when Hit the Floor is over and I want a job, I feel like I'm going to, like agents, some managers are great at that, and some agents are not great, but it was kind of a superficial thing where I was like, I need an agent, not a manager, but I'll meet with these guys. Why not? Right. So I met with them, and they were awesome. They really impressed me. They really just had a plan for me in a way that no one ever had before. And I was like, I like this plan. Like,
that's such
this
a
is great.
Feeling.
Yeah, like it was, they really liked my work, and they understood like the kind of story I wanted to tell, and they understood like what I wanted from my career, which was basically to write on television shows, primarily to like, because there's like staffing, we call that staffing, where you're like writing on a show, and then the other side is development, where you're developing, a show and pitching it and selling it. And I want to do that one day, but like not right now. Yeah. And they were okay with that. And they also had really good notes for me. Like, even though my script was good enough to share with them, it was also like they had like thoughts, but their thoughts were very constructive and I thought really helpful. So managers are kind of more like long-term agents. Like, they're all about helping you figure out your next like 5 years or longer, and really helping you. And they also will get into the nitty-gritty when you're writing something and give like creative notes. And but what I asked from them was like, okay, you guys are great. Let's work together, be my managers. But what I really also need is an agent. So then, because they also brought like these really great connections, they were able to connect me with an agent. And my agents are at Paradigm is the agency, and they're amazing. They were kind of the last piece of like Kristen's representation puzzle. And everyone like works really well together, and everybody kind of works to get Kristen jobs, and it's all very great.
Awesome. So the managers kind of have a more like overseeing role, where the agent would.
The agents are kind of like, they're like, okay, they're a little more short term. They're like, okay, what's next? What's your next job? I heard about this. You should meet for this. But some agents are like, it all is kind of blurry. Like, everyone's kind of doing the same thing.
So it's similar to. So I'm from the music industry. Sorry to cut you off. And
I know.
It's similar to the A&R and manager model. So the A&R would kind of be the intermediary, looking for like your next step, and your manager is more looking after your whole career and your whole vision. Right.
That's pretty much it. Yeah. And then sometimes if the manager has a lead on like a gig, then like awesome. Like, sometimes these, things come from all over, and so you never know. Like, and also like a lot of times just the writer themselves will be like, oh, I heard about a job and like I got it myself. Like, everybody's looking.
Everyone's hustling.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So yeah, that's kind of how that happened. And
it's a really nice story. That must have felt amazing when you've got someone, when you're meeting people that have a vision for you off the back of your work.
Yeah, I felt very like official. Like, I felt like, because a lot of the times before that, you're just like, I think I'm a good writer. I think I'm a great writer, but there's nobody validating that. You just have to like believe in yourself. Like, it sounds so cheesy, but you just have to be like, I can do this. I'm legit. And you just write and you just cross your fingers. And then when you get representation, and even when you get like that first job, it feels like, see, I told you. Like, but in between those steps, there's so much just like, maybe I'm crazy. Like, maybe this is never, ever gonna happen. And you just like, you gotta just be kind of crazy and just trust that it will. And it takes a lot of willpower. I mean, Definitely. And that's just getting in. And then once you're in, you're like, I hope this keeps going. I just gotta trust. You don't know.
Well, for a lot of people, you get the when you do get in, then you have imposter syndrome. So it's like you've done all that work for a decade, and then you're here, and it's like, ooh, am I good enough?
Yeah. Or like, are they gonna figure out that they made the wrong decision?
You're right, exactly.
They chose poorly. Yeah, it is real. It is very real.
It's just what we have to deal with in the creative industries, I suppose. Just carry on believing in yourself and keep the work going.
For sure.
So in the last year, you've published 2 books as well. Is that right?
Yeah. So I did that. It's this company called Learner Publishing, and they have a line of books, a line of titles under Darby Creek, which basically they So this was something that I started doing before I got staff, like when I was still an assistant, and was just like, I just want to write. And I also like love books, and it came out kind of randomly because a friend just like told me about it and was like, you should submit a sample. And what they do specifically is they have you write like really short books, but they're for teenagers. So they're like really appealing to teenagers very specifically, but they're like at a lower reading level. So the idea is to get teenagers who are struggling to read, to read stuff that is like interesting to them. And it was really cool because at first I was like, okay, so I can't just like write whatever I want. I have to make it sound like, I have to dumb it down to fit this reading level. But then what I realized is that this is kind of silly, but like so they give you a tool, there's like a link where you, let's say you like write a paragraph and then you put the prose into the link and it analyzes it and it tells you what, based on like the vocabulary and how many syllables are in the words and how long each sentence is, it tells you like what reading level, like what you is at. And so I thought, okay, I have to get this down to like a certain reading level. And gosh, I'm so smart. That's going to be so hard for me. But apparently, like when I first was just like writing a draft or like a paragraph, I wrote just kind of in the style of like I would if I was writing an outline for television. So just kind of, I was like, let me just, like write a little bit and see where I'm starting at. And funnily enough, when you're writing an outline for television and apparently it's the same like reading level as like, like middle school or like, like an 11-year-old.
Wow.
Which sounds silly, but it also makes total sense because like television is about, it's not about like kind of alienate, it's about access, right? Like it's about entertainment that everyone, depending on what the story is, but like generally it's about, putting, a form of entertainment that people can sit down and like engage in. And so it makes sense that it's not this kind of like highbrow, like whatever thing. But I just remember thinking like, oh, wow, that is the reading level of television is
That's
like
hilarious.
for an 11. But so the book, the titles, so I wrote 2 for them. And it was a really awesome process because they're very short, but I'd never been through any kind of like publisher editing process at all. And but it was really great because they pair you with an editor, and they also, what they do is they come up with that, their editing team comes up with the kind of premise of each title, and they basically hire out a writer to write the premise. Right. And so kind of a lot like television where your showrunner is like, here's the realm, write an outline first and then write the actual thing. And so it was really fun because I'd been writing scripts for so long that I was able to kind of open up and write in a different format, and it definitely makes your brain work differently. And but it was so fun, and the process with the editor was great because it's basically like a person who's a lot smarter than you and has a lot more experience than you going through your work and being like, here's how you can make it better. And it's great because you're like, thank you.
It's like being back at school.
Yeah. And so that's what those titles are. It was a really awesome opportunity. And I think and also because they're short, they're kind of like 15,000 words, which is like not a lot. It's like a third of a novel, like a sixth of kind of like a long novel. But it helped me. I mean, as a screenwriter, I had just like no idea. I was like, you want me to write how many words? Like the idea of writing a book just felt like I didn't even know. So this was kind of like a mini intro into what that process is like and what that world is like. And it gave me a lot of confidence. Like, I definitely want to write my own novel eventually. They take a lot of time, but whenever I do, I feel like I know a little more what that process is like, and it's less scary.
Definitely. Again, learning by doing, and also what your creative process is like for writing for something a bit more long form, as opposed to writing for TV.
Yeah. So
brilliant.
yeah.
Brilliant. So, quick question: Do you think that you could have, because you said networking is a very important part, if you had gone to New York, do you think everything would have been different? Like, would you have been able to write for TV over there, or is LA essential?
I think if I went to New York, I would have ended up, I guess I might have ended up writing books, like, or features, just because the publishing world is so strong there. And I think that it is possible to live in New York, like, and write TV. The thing is that LA has most of the jobs, and most of the people that you want to just touch base with are kind of here. And so there's just not as many opportunities in New York, and it's already so competitive. So it's like, it is definitely possible, and people do it. A lot of people who are playwrights who are in New York because they want to be in theater will kind of segue to doing TV, like, when it comes along, and then maybe break in that way. And but I feel like even those guys eventually end up having to come to LA if they want more opportunities. So it's definitely not impossible. It's just really hard in a situation where the odds are kind of not great, just unless you're super patient. So it's a little, there's just more jobs out here. And but a lot of people, sometimes people be in LA and take a job in New York, or they're in New York doing something else, and stuff comes up, and so they'll hop on a TV job there, but there's just less.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome.
Yeah.
What's your favorite thing about screenwriting?
I really like the opportunity. Like, right now, I think that television and features, there is, like, I'm really into representation and putting people on screen and behind the screen and telling stories that haven't yet been told. And I think that it's such a powerful medium for that, for just, I mean, I watch a lot of TV, and there's just so much now that it's like, there's no, like, now more than ever, I think it's possible to just tell stories that haven't been told. Like, one, because there's so many opportunities, but also I think because there's so much out there, people want new stuff, and it's like, well, I've got an idea. Like, what if you told this from a woman's perspective, or from, like, a person of color's perspective? Like, how's that for a new idea? Like,
exactly right.
All of a sudden, you can just open up the world, and there's that many more ideas and stories to tell. And I really think it's very exciting to be able to be a part of that, and to be able to tell stories and bring stories to people,
Absolutely.
A lot of growing up in the South, watching movies, there's not a lot of people who look like me in those movies. And I think that kind of, it took me a while to realize, like, it, like, hey, like, what if, like, you were able to see yourself? Like, that's just, like, a really powerful thing to be able to see yourself, whether it's on screen or just, like, knowing that someone who has a similar background or experience does a job that you didn't ever think was possible to you, it just kind of changes the game. And I feel like, I think, writing is a cool way, whether it's telling stories or just like being the person doing the writing, is like a cool way to like let the next generation know that it's definitely a thing. It's definitely a thing, like no matter who you are, that you can do. So
I love that. That. It is really an exciting time because, like you said, there's so many more opportunities now, and because there's so much choice, it kind of gives the opportunity for writers, filmmakers, actors, etc., to really drill down on different niches, because those niches will find their audience, because there's just so many eyeballs now.
For sure.
Brilliant. So, thank you so much for being on this. It's just been an amazing conversation. Is there anything we should be looking out for from yourself?
So last year I worked on season 2 of Nightfall for the History Channel, and I believe it premieres in the UK on July 2nd. I could be totally wrong, but it's gonna be on Amazon. It's coming to Amazon for you guys. So it's season 2 of Nightfall, starring Tom Cullen, Mark Hamill, and a bunch of amazing other people. Lots of Brits. So definitely check that out. I might have the date wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's coming in July, because I saw a bunch of them on like a step and repeat at the Good Omens premiere, and I was like, oh, cool. So that's coming up, and I'm excited for people to check out. The first season of Nightfall is on Netflix, but it's kind of a reboot. So if you don't have time to like check that out, like it's not a big deal. Like you can drop right into season 2.
They rebooted it specifically for Netflix.
It's not exactly a reboot. It's more like this is a good example of what happens when a showrunner changes.
Okay. Go on, yeah. History
Channel brought in a new showrunner who's my boss, and they basically were like, so on History Channel over here, the show Vikings does very well for them.
Yeah.
And I think that they just wanted something a little more in that direction. So we kind of changed the aesthetic a little bit to fit that. Kind of an experiment. But yeah, so it's the same characters, but almost like a different tone, like, because it's through a different showrunner's vision. Right. And yeah, so I call it a reboot only because I don't want people to feel like if they don't have time to like watch all of season 1 and they can't watch season 2. But of course you can totally watch both. But I just don't want it to keep people from watching, because I mean there's so much TV out there that sometimes you just don't have time.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, that sounds exciting. Definitely going to check that out. So Nightfall coming soon on Amazon.
Exactly.
Amazon Prime. Nice. Brilliant. So where can people find you online if you want people to find you online?
I have Instagram. I'm really bad at social media. I'm like, oh man, where do I want people? My Instagram is HeyKBear, Bear spelled Berre. I'm on Twitter, but nobody cares about my Twitter. I think my Twitter is Saberre. I don't even know. But yeah, I'm there.
Awesome.
I'm never on Facebook, so don't even forget it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad that I did interrupt you after your conversation, because this has just been such a great conversation. I'm so glad.
My pleasure. This was awesome.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thanks, guys, for tuning in to another episode of For the Creators. We really, really appreciate your ears. If you can, please forward this on to someone who you think will like it, someone in the creative industries, or a friend, or a writer. Give us a review on Apple Podcasts if you can. And yeah, we'll see you again next week. Thanks so much.